our commentators now, political commentators today. We welcome Fletcher, Tabuteau and Gareth Hughes. Kia ora koroa, thanks for being with us.
Kia ora morena.
Gareth is the director of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance Aotearoa, a former Green MP, no longer a member of any political party. Fletcher Tabuteau is a former New Zealand First MP from 2014 to 2020, former deputy leader of the party, former parliamentary undersecretary to the then Minister of Foreign Affairs Winston Peters and the then Minister for Regional Development Shane Jones. He now works for lobbying and communications government relations firm Capital Government Relations. It is nearly 8 minutes past 11. Another shock loss for this Parliament. Loss of an MP, far too young. Loss of an MP, full stop, a sitting MP. Rare and a great shock. Takutai Tarsh Kemp's unexpected passing. Gareth, your party's experienced this more than once, actually. It is just, you could see all the vision, all the communication. Nobody saw this coming. Everybody utterly in shock.
No, that's right. The whole Parliament's in shock, and lots of love and aroha to her family and to Pāti Māori. You could see just the genuine emotion on the faces in Parliament, and what a shock this was. Obviously, she had been battling kidney disease, and for many people that was a battle that was absolutely hidden, that they weren't aware of, and I understand she was working right up to the end. A huge tragedy.
She'd gone public about the diagnosis and about needing treatment in the middle of last year, but as for between then and now, as we said, the public certainly just did not have this on their radar. Fletcher, again, just so shocking and so sad for everyone in that Parliament, and especially, of course, for her whānau and her community.
Yeah, I think, you just said it. I think everyone in that Parliament, and, my huge condolences to the whānau. But what we saw during the contributions from the different parties on the day to acknowledge her passing in the House before they shut Parliament down early to acknowledge her passing formally were, I think it was important for me because it reminded me that these are just people in the House, whether they're ministers or backbenchers. They're just normal people kind of struggling to do their best. And what I saw in that moment during that debate was sadness and loss and acknowledgement from what you might call political opponents who will miss their sister, as it was described. And so just genuinely heartbreaking, and unfortunately it reminds me at a time where we probably need it more than ever that actually this New Zealand Parliament is a collection of individuals, just normal people, just trying to do their best. And unfortunately it took the death of their colleague to highlight that for us all.
Parliament has potentially become more partisan politics around the world, has been, Gareth. I think it's misunderstood, certainly in select committees, just how closely people from very different parties can work together. But also so interesting to see the genuine grief of Pini Henare, who was in such a tight tussle for that seat. But once again, that's the politics of it. This is the humanity of it.
And, that debate was kind of Parliament at its best. Genuine people, as Fletcher said, real people coming together to acknowledge what's really important with life. Fletcher will know this as well. We've got a very small Parliament compared to other countries. People will work very closely together. I think everyone acknowledges that people are there for the right reasons. So there's a social element. It becomes like a large extended family. So you could see the impact on all parties. And Pini Henare, he only lost by 42 votes. It was a pretty tough election in the sense of allegations around inappropriate spending with Manuela Marae, etc. But, he was genuinely affected, and you could see the love and the relationship. They described themselves as brother and sister.
I want to be careful about talking about it so early, but people are beginning to turn to what happens now, because this could be quite significant in terms of relationships in Parliament. And Gareth, we were going into next year and into the election. There will be a by-election for a big, important urban Māori seat. And already the likes of Vernon Small in the Sunday Star Times thinking about what Te Pāti Māori, obviously right now focused on other things, but thinking about what Te Pāti Māori and Labour in particular might be thinking about the main contenders for that seat. And making the point, someone like a John Tamahiri, also utterly grief-stricken at the moment, but who's had such experience, something that, if you bring in an experienced player, whether this may begin to assist that relationship between Labour and Te Pāti Māori. It's early days, but these will be things thought about over the coming weeks in terms of what happens from here.
Well, there will be a by-election. Takutai Tarsh Kemp was an electorate MP in Tamaki Makaurau, so it's up to the Prime Minister to set the date, which hasn't been set yet. It does still feel very early to talk about it.
I appreciate
but
that.
There will be a by-election, and this presents a real conundrum, I think, for the opposition parties who are most likely to win the seat based on historical records. You talk about John Tamahere, obviously a former Labour MP in that very seat himself. Penny Henare, as I mentioned before, had a very close election race last year. But the conundrum for the opposition parties is that while there's no strategic impact on the makeup of parliament or governments, which sometimes by-elections can influence, this is hugely symbolic for how the opposition parties present themselves, their relationships, their dynamics. It's a conundrum in the sense that if you say maybe even get a three-way race, remember Maraba Davidson has stood in that very seat since 2014 as well, and the race is rough, parties are attacking, they're trying to outflank each other. It doesn't symbolise or signify parties getting ready to be in government.
I mean, another option that was mooted by Vernon, who's a very experienced political commentator, of course, was whether Labour and the Greens don't run at all. And the reason for raising this is that partnership at the moment, all polls suggesting Labour would need, Greens would need, Te Pāti Māori, all three working together to become a government next year. That relationship is going to be so in the spotlight, and the management of that relationship is going to be so significant next year. Your thoughts, Fletcher, if you're prepared to make them this early. We do appreciate how early things are.
I think these are exactly the kind of thoughts that those involved will be having, and I think there's some good points raised in our conversation today, especially I hadn't even thought about the idea of not contending it. I think Labour needs to send a message back to the Auckland electorate, talk about how much Auckland means to them and how strong they are, and this is an opportunity to do that with a standing, an MP who's had great standing in Tamaki Makaurau and who is well respected, although I've already heard rumours, that maybe Willie Jackson might run, which I don't want to make light of the situation now, but would certainly make for an interesting contest of ideas in party politics if John Tamahere were to stand for the Māori Party going forward. But yeah, a lot to consider.
Yeah, well, also those two have got a strong relationship going back years, back to their, afternoon radio show. So again, right. I think this is why it's on people's minds, that one of the biggest political challenges for the parties off the left aspiring for government next year is going to be their relationship, yeah?
But I don't think it's ideal for our democracy if it's effectively an uncontested election. However, you do have to be aware of the context. This isn't a scandal why the seat has become available because of a tragic passing. All parties, I think, will want to put their stall out to the voters and how they can best represent Māori, particularly when we see such a strong anti-treaty response from the current government. For Labour, the issue for them is if they don't contest, if they do win, the candidate, be it Willie or be it Penny Henare, brings in Georgie Danzy from the Labour Party list. They're a party that is looking for new blood as well. She is a high-profile candidate who stood in other by-elections. A party that's, weakened the traditional swing area of the Waikato. So that's what they would be giving up, the opportunity to put out their stall, bring in new candidates. But for Te Pāti Māori, if they lose the seat, they're down a single MP. That's less resources for them, less opportunity to participate in Parliament. So it's a vexed conundrum that the parties, I'm sure, will be negotiating.
A tangihanga, of course, to follow, and I know it will be a very long time before that Parliament really fully registers just what has happened, as we see the second loss of someone far too young in one sitting term. This also as Te Pāti Māori co-leaders are back from their suspension periods, it feels like a long time ago now. Fletcher, I did see one interesting analysis, I think it was Audrey Young's column, that there was an effective dollar fine, I think in the region of $20,000, as well as the symbolism of, being banned from Parliament. But they will be obviously coming back in this period of great grief. But I'm interested in your take on that suspension and just how it all unfolded, Fletcher.
Yeah, I think it's all about context. I think people have taken the ruling kind of very superficially that somehow Māori leaders were being punished for doing the haka in the House and somehow tikanga is not being taken into account. There are haka and waiata performed in the House all the time. I myself have participated in them, but I've never walked out from behind my seat, being a 6'3", 230, 240 pound guy, and walked up to anyone else in the House and got into their space. So I don't think people realise how serious that is. We're a house of robust debate, and we need to be able to feel safe to view and verbalise those ideas. And you don't really get a sense of it when you watch the television, but it's quite an intimate space. So anyone coming up to you like that is confrontational. And I think what we're also missing is the debate around the fact that many MPs have been asked to appear before privileges before, and they all have. Well, in the main, they all have. And because of that, that's been taken into consideration. But here we have individuals who refuse to participate in the privileges process, refuse to apologise, and I think that's contrasted with the ruling that was given down to MP Penny Henare as opposed to the leadership of the Māori Party.
So you don't find that length particularly egregious, Gareth? We've had your views before. I know you don't.
I've been pretty clear. This is unprecedented, dangerous, and I think badly managed on the politics.
Prime Minister Luxon is back from his trip to Beijing, and I think we touched on that last week. He'd had his meeting with Xi Jinping, it was just after the Cook Islands story broke, actually, about the funding being suspended to the Cook Islands, some of the funding being suspended to the Cook Islands. Has since been at NATO. A lot's happened in the world since then, but by and large, is it a case that often things go well for Prime Ministers overseas and then they have to come home, Gareth?
Well, that's right. It's great optics for him to be meeting President Xi and sitting down with Mark Rutte. Obviously, he was hoping especially for a meeting, face-to-face time with US President Trump. That didn't eventuate. This curious situation that Trump actually asked the Indo-Pacific four leaders, South Korea, Japan, Australia and New Zealand, to attend the summit. 3 of the 4 didn't attend. Only our Prime Minister went. And
We've been last 2 or 3 years, have we not?
That's true, but this time they were actually requested by the US President.
Right,
and
to
those,
come. Okay.
And those 4 leaders of much larger states decided not to attend. So it was curious in that respect. But for a Prime Minister, it's good to be on the global stage, having those sit-downs and those photographs. His Deputy Prime Minister, meanwhile, was attacking, citizens exercising their freedom of choice. And, obviously there's a lot of politics back home. Well, this is David Seymour, using taxpayer funds to attack people like Dayman Salmon, who dared to criticise his regulatory standards bill.
Well,
I
you
think
have to give me more
unbecoming.
context again. I saw some stuff on social media and so forth, but what?
Oh, he's been running a series of victim of the day posts.
Yeah, I recall those. Are they not in on social media posts?
Yes, that's right. Yes,
okay.
Yeah. But I mean, this is what his Prime Minister Luxon's replacement, the acting Prime Minister, was doing in his stead.
I don't think it's unusual though for MPs to run commentary on their. Sorry, I was trying to understand your context. To run commentary on their social media sites, but for you, what? Not appropriate for an acting PM, or? No,
that's right. I think it limits undermines the role, and you might have thought he might have had a bit more class in the role.
All right. Your take on these overseas ventures by PM Luxon, Fletcher, and we'll talk more about the Foreign Affairs Minister in a moment.
Yeah, I think the highlight was, Gareth alluded to it, his conversation with Mark Rutte. And, the takeaway from that is the NATO leadership were clear about wanting to engage with the IP4 and learn about, what it is we're experiencing down here in the Indo-Pacific. He's right, only we turned up But I think as not actual members of NATO, strictly speaking, to be invited along to engage, to have those side meetings, yeah, not only does it look good in terms of the media coverage, but in my own experience, it's. I think we underestimate the value of speaking to world leaders face to face, ka nohi ki te ka nohi, as it were, to express our concerns and to share our vision. So, yeah, pretty powerful and pretty important that Luxon was there.
The Foreign Affairs Minister has been cautious in his statements on Iran and Israel, and particularly those US that US attack on the nuclear sites. A lot calling for him to be more forthright about that. Gareth, your take?
Well, we walked this very curious line. Australia was pretty effusive in their support for the Prime Minister. Obviously, they're trying to negotiate AUKUS and whether or not they'll even get the submarines they've purchased and were promised. We walked this funny line in the sense that we said we're going to wait and see for more evidence without actually articulating what we were actually looking for, what the evidence was, or when we would actually ever receive it. Effectively, what we did as a country was put our head below the parapet, tried not to draw any attention to ourselves because, look, I think it's pretty clear this was probably an illegal act under international law. Even President Trump's own intelligence agencies were saying weeks before Iran wasn't imminently at risk of getting a nuclear weapon. So this is the geopolitics that New Zealand is trying to walk, trying not to draw attention to ourselves. I think Luxon did dodge a bullet, probably not the best analogy to use, at NATO, with other NATO countries increasing their expenditure to 5% of GDP. We've somehow got away from that meeting without needing that requirement. But the fact of the matter is, we are a country who stands up for the rules-based order. It's been the US, unfortunately, and Israel who are breaching international rules, including International Court of Justice and criminal court arrest warrants, and what's happening in Palestine. It is a genocide. So a very weak position, and I think many New Zealanders would have hoped New Zealand actually stood up for international law.
All right, in your view, yeah. On the question of the foreign minister's approach to these things, Fletcher, we saw it also with tariffs, getting very frustrated with some of the commentary around the tariffs. And again, is there a fine line between doing what you feel like you have to do strategically and actually failing to say things that you ought to say? Where does that line get drawn?
Yeah, and that has historically been New Zealand's position. This is not an unusual response from the Foreign Minister or New Zealand. It is all about that rules-based order and making sure our multilateral mechanisms remain in place and that we respect them. I mean, the Foreign Minister, Winston, spoke about two things: getting our people back and out of harm's way, and making sure that we can continue to contribute to the international debate without further disintegration and despair, were his words. So let's be real about what it is New Zealand can achieve in their commentary. Let's not take sides when sides are not called for at this time and make an issue greater than it has been. We will find out shortly what the ruling is and what the US has done in terms of the world's eyes, and we will have a position then. But until that time, absolutely, the Foreign Minister is walking that tightrope, as it were.
The New Zealand First MP, Tanya Unkovic, resigns. David Wilson, next on the list, is to become an MP. It's not that common to resign during your first term as an MP. It's a pretty significant privilege that people get to have. But deciding what essentially it's not for her. I think her words were, I can contribute more in the private sector, Fletcher.
Yeah, I was looking back in my time in the two terms I was there, and I think about 6 to 8 people each term kind of left. Most of it was controversially, and others kind of walked away at what they thought was an appropriate time. So I don't think there's anything deeper than what it is we've been told. I genuinely think that Tanya thought she could contribute better in her private capacity. She's an inspirational speaker. She's about helping people, develop and grow. And so, whilst it must have been a hard decision for her, I'm happy for her that she made it, and then genuinely happy that Dr. David Wilson is next on the New Zealand First Party list.
It's not for everyone, Parliament, is it, Gareth?
No. But I'm racking my brain to think of a single MP that I can think of who, halfway through a term in their first term, left voluntarily without any form of scandal or problems. I can't name a single person and challenge Fletcher to name someone, but was it that she was bored of the role? I know it's not that exciting asking patsy questions to ministers and attending, all the meetings and business. But I wonder, is this a signal of something changing within New Zealand First? Obviously, she was most well known for her anti-trans unworkable bathroom bill, her relationships with some of the COVID issues in the previous term. David Wilson, however, is much more of a traditional New Zealand First economic development background. Is this the party trying to reorientate and pivot towards maybe a more traditional approach? Who knows, because there's been very little information shared about it.
And it's just not for everybody, is it? Thank you very much for that, both of you, Gareth Hughes and Fletcher Tabuteau.